Good day, everyone. Welcome to our presentation today. We are students of the Department of Marketing and Corporate Strategies of the Business School here in Ike University. And today we are going to present on the question statement: if critical thinking is so critical for development, why do people, even the educated, find it so difficult to think critically? Okay, so our objective here is to explain the process of thinking, or what critical thinking is, the various barriers to them, and how to overcome them to make sound judgments or reasoned judgments. Join me, let's explore this together. So we are going to look at two broad categories of these barriers, and we are going to start with the first one, which is the cognitive and psychological barriers. Then later we'll move to the educational and social barriers.
So, cognitive laziness and rushing to a response. So, cognitive laziness refers to the brain's natural tendency to avoid unnecessary thinking by depending on shortcuts. So, for instance, accepting the headline of an article as true without even reading the full article is a form of cognitive laziness. So, rushing to a response, giving an answer quickly without thinking of the question. So, for instance, a student answers a question very quickly without thinking of the question is also a form of rushing to a response.
Ego preservation and fixed mindset. The final barrier is the desire to protect one's self-image, which directly prevents us from correcting our own mistake. Carol S. Dweck's research shows that a person with a fixed mindset views their intelligence as permanent, unchangeable traits, and they believe they are either smart or they aren't. In a group discussion or classroom project, this creates a defensive wall. If someone points out a flaw in a fixed mindset student argument, they don't find it helpful, but rather they find it as an attack to their intelligence or a threat to their ego. To protect their self-image, they will rather argue blindly, get defensive, and ignore the facts. This reflects completely on what Richard Paul and Linda Elder call intellectual humility. When a person is more worried about looking smart than being accurate, learning stops completely. Thank you.
I'll be presenting on educational and social barriers to critical thinking. Critical thinking is the ability to analyze information carefully and make reasonable decisions. However, our schools and society sometimes face barriers that make critical thinking difficult. First barrier is the copy and paste classroom. Many educational systems encourage students to memorize information and repeat it during exams rather than question, analyze, and understand ideas. As a result, students may focus on getting good grades instead of developing independent thinking skills. The second barrier is the job information neglect. Because information is available instantly through the internet and AI tools, many people immediately search for answers instead of taking time to think through problems themselves. This can lead to shallow understanding because having an answer is not the same as understanding it. In summary, educational systems that rewards memorization and a culture that encourage instant answers can both discourage critical thinking. To become better critical thinkers, we should ask questions, analyze information carefully, and take time to understand problems deeply.
My point is having a degree doesn't mean a person can think critically. A person might complete a course of study and have a degree, but they can't think critically, solve problems, or make good decisions. Thinking involves analyzing information, questioning assumptions, and evaluating evidence rather than simply memorizing facts. One example is a university graduate may know many business theories but still make poor financial decisions because they do not carefully analyze risks before investing money. Another example is a person with a degree in science might memorize formulas and pass his or her examinations, but believe false information on the internet. So another example is that a person with a degree in science might memorize formulas and pass exam, yet believe false information he or she sees on the social media because they fail to check the question or source of information and evidence. In conclusion, a degree provides knowledge, qualifications, and the ability to think critically comes from questioning, reasoning and analyzing evidence, and applying the knowledge he or she receives in real life situations.
So, being good at a job versus thinking. Many people believe that earning a degree automatically means a person is able to think critically. However, there's a very big difference between being skilled at a job and thinking critically. A person may carry out duties efficiently, follow procedures correctly, and meet workplace expectations, yet still struggle to analyze information, question assumptions, or solve unfamiliar problems. This shows that job competence and thinking ability are related but not identical.
The next point we'd like to talk about is normalizing being wrong. How often do you see someone in a high stakes meeting or a public debate make a mistake and think, wow, what's a sign of strength? Unfortunately, not often enough. Right now, we are facing a cultural challenge where we consistently value ego over truth within our social and professional groups. We've built an environment where changing your mind is seen as a sign of weakness and defeat. But if we want to truly progress, we have to change that narrative. In his book Educating Reason, philosopher Harvey Siegel notes that a true critical thinker must be appropriately moved by reasons. Think about what that actually means. Being moved by reasons means that when new data, better logic, or superior perspective comes along, we must shift our opinions. We must change our opinions. It's not a loss, it's an intellectual upgrade. To achieve this, our communities and organizations must actively promote what psychologist Carol Dwecker calls a growth mindset.
However, in everyday social life or on modern internet platforms, people naturally cluster into echo chambers. For example, if a student expresses an unpopular opinion in a campus group chat, they risk being socially excluded by their peers. To avoid this social discomfort, individuals lean heavily into automatically adopting the biases, prejudices, and slogans of the social group chat without questioning them. It is socially safer to fit in than to stand out and ask for evidence.
Learning should not be about memorizing facts or information. Instead, students should be encouraged to ask questions, do research about different ideas, and solve real-world problems. According to Martin Lipton in Thinking in Education, classrooms should be communities of theory where students learn by exploring, thinking, and working together rather than simply listening to the teacher. Teachers should also know how to assess students instead of only grading them whether they know the correct answer. They should evaluate how students think, reason, and explain their ideas. This helps students to develop critical and analytical thinking skills instead of developing on memorizing. As a result, students see education as a process of discovery and understanding rather than learning.
Ways of suppressing our brains to use the deliberative type of thinking rather than the automatic type. We made mention of points like normalizing being wrong and learning by asking to battle down our way of preserving our ego and many others. I believe all that we've made mention brings a conclusion to our big riddle, which is if critical thinking is so critical for development, why do people, even the educated, find it so difficult to think? Thank you very much for your time and see you in our next presentation.